Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the plenary session this morning and are enjoying the virtual Fed GIS conference. I want to thank you for joining our special interest group on GIS support to joint all domain operations. My name is Gary Schofield. I'm a lead account manager on Esri's Defense C4ISR team and Esri program manager for a commercial joint mapping toolkit. I'm pleased to moderate this session with our distinguished panelists, Colonel Kenneth Fry from TRADOC Proponent Office Geospatial, Lieutenant Colonel Chip Hahn from the U.S. Northern Command, Master Gunnery Sergeant Tiffany Winfrey from 2nd Intelligence Battalion, and Chief Jeremiah Savage from the 82nd Airborne Division. GIS and geospatial technology have always been crucial for situational understanding in military operations. As DoD works to connect sensors and networks across all services for joint all-domain command and control, GIS will be even more important to integrate and understand this information in the common context of geography in order to drive rapid, informed decision-making and decisive action. Today, we will hear from our speakers on how they are applying GIS to support their mission. In addition to the value they are realizing today, we will discuss their vision for the needs and capabilities to realize success in future joint all-domain operations. After all speakers have presented, we will answer questions and discuss further on this topic. Please submit your questions in Slido tool if you want to get your questions. If we don't get to your questions today, we will be sure to reach out to you. We'll begin with Colonel Fry. Colonel Kenneth Fry has served as commander of A 14th Engineer Battalion and 1st Battalion, 345th Regiment Engineer Training Support, with other company and field grade positions in the 16th, 44th, 864th, and 20th Engineer Battalions. He has also served in the headquarters of U.S. Army Pacific, U.S. Army North, and U.S. Southern Command, as well as senior advisor to the Afghanistan National Army as part of the Combined Security Transition Command, Afghanistan. He is currently the Director of Training and Doctrine Command, Proponent Office Geospatial. Thank you for being with us today, Colonel.
Thank you very much. So what does the TRADOC Proponent Geospatial do? I'm the Army's Geospatial Requirements Manager. So I work with everybody in the Army who needs geospatial, which is really the whole Army. And I work the processes to make that happen. So whether it's a material solution, an education solution, a data solution, whatever that is, I kind of lead the charge to make things happen. So on the path between now and a joint all-domain command and control, there's a few things that from the Army perspective that we are going through to get there, starting off with modernization. So the Army is developing now, or implementing now, what is called the Common Operating Environment, where everybody operates off of the same information exchange within a tactical environment. In the legacy world, you could be in a command post and have multiple different computing systems, each with their own geospatial background, but none of those geospatial backgrounds were interoperable. They would be proprietary, or for some reason not have any interoperability. So now we're coming to a common map background, which we call Standard Shareable Geospatial Foundation, which is comprised of the 4 bullets you see there on the left. The benefit of going to this method is within that command post, which you'll have the ability to serve all of the warfighting functions with information. Now, historically, geospatial has kind of been stuck over near the Intel guide because they use the imagery for GeoInt. But now, if everybody has access to geospatial, you hit all the other 5 warfighting functions. So this is kind of an expectation. Nowadays, you can pull up your phone and you can choose Waze, you can choose Google Maps or any other geospatial tool and pretty much do your own geospatial to some kind of degree. Well, now we're going to enable all people within the command post to do that. Furthermore, through the tactical server infrastructure, which is holding that geospatial data, it gets pumped not only to the command post, but out to the mounted computing environment. So any platforms within a helicopter or tank, whatever it is, it has a map system in it, as well as a handheld environment. So moving on down to multi-domain. So the Army kicked out its multi-domain operations concept recently. So we're not only interested in the land, just land anymore, but we need to look at space, cyberspace, maritime, and the air. So, when you think of the subterranean environment, bathymetric environment, because even the Army operates in littoral waters, and we need to understand what's under the water in order to go support logistics towards the shore. Obviously, other services, namely the Navy and Marines, have interest in the same domain. But as a joint force, it's valuable to understand these other domains and the geospatial capability to do that. So if you look at the image on the far right, We don't have that today in the Army's geospatial infrastructure. We have elevation data so we can see hills and mountains, but to add subterranean or bathymetric data, right now that's not a capability, although it is readily available within industry. So we've done some studies recently, which are depicted in the middle. That's from an NGA drone doing a LiDAR capture of a bridge to capture a very complex 3D structure and learn how the Army is going to adopt some 3D format standards and move that data around and process it and get to the solutions, both material and software, and also training for soldiers on how to manage that type of information. That study is going on right now, but so that in the end supports multi-domain operations when we can look across the domains with geospatial, which brings us to the last piece. So now we're going to look at multi-domain and air, land, sea, space, and all that. Is the Army's, well, the joint effort to go to joint all-domain command and control, and the Army has added the C combined, which means you go multinational. So right now, I can tell you my partners here on the net with the Marines, Navy, and Air Force, we don't all have the same view of geospatial and how it's managed. We have some common interests and we have some different interests, but it's not a common way to share geospatial data. Well, with JADC2, it is going to be common at that level within the joint force war, joint geospatial. And then you got to integrate multinational partners, which is where the combined comes in. And to make it even more complicated between service interests, different services have different platforms, different soldiers, different training. In a multinational world, you also have different classification levels. So there's unclassified data, secret data, and top secret data. How do you share that within a digital architecture across different services, different nations, and so on? A very complex problem. Fortunately, not all of that is in my wheelhouse, but that is a big problem. But that is where it's going in the future. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having a discussion here.
Thank you, Colonel Fry, and for your comments and the work you're doing to modernize the force and prepare for the future. Now we will hear from Lieutenant Colonel Hahn from U.S. Northern Command. Lieutenant Colonel Chip Hahn serves as the full-time Army National Guard engineer in the Engineering Division, J42, of the NORAD and U.S. Northcom Logistics Directorate. He is responsible for Army engineering planning and coordination of Homeland Defense, civil support, and theater security cooperation activities. Lieutenant Colonel Hahn is also a registered professional engineer in Missouri and Colorado. Thank you for being here with us today, Lieutenant Colonel Hahn.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here presenting today. I want to talk a little bit quickly about what Northcom is doing, our organization stories, where we're going in the future as it pertains to GIS. I approach GIS as a GIS stakeholder. As a joint engineer, we are responsible for providing engineer capabilities to the Joint Force Commander, including combat engineering, general engineering, and geospatial services. And so I've approached this as an engineering professional and really gotten into learning the different ways that we can integrate geospatial information to operationalize it. As Colonel Fry alluded to, a lot of times map data and other things are put over in the realm of the intelligence folks, and we really, at least from our perspective at Northcom, are trying to operationalize that data and leveraging it to meet our commander's requirements. If you could go to the next slide, please, I'll give you a brief overview of the commands. You probably have heard of NORAD, or the North American Aerospace Defense Command, and U.S. Northern Command. These are a binational combined command established in October of 2002, and we have two distinct missions. One on the NORAD side, which is aerospace warning, aerospace control, and maritime warning in the defense of North America. So that includes Canada, the continental United States, and Alaska. And then the United States Northern Command, its mission is to deter, detect, defend threats to the defeat threats to the United States, and also to conduct security cooperation activities with allies, partners, and to support civil authorities. So a lot of things you're seeing in the news today as it relates to defense support to civil authorities, DoD providing support for COVID response, that is an example of our support to civil authorities. GIS is not new to U.S. Northcom. Throughout our entire history, we've leveraged geospatial information to meet our information requirements. early or mid 2018, the command switched from a Google Earth platform over to Esri, and that transition has been successful. We've done a lot of cross training within the command, and we're really really having success in getting good training and distribution of geospatial capabilities across both the headquarters and to our subordinate commands. I would be remiss if I didn't give some credit to the support agencies that help us be successful with geospatial activities. We have a National Geospatial Intelligence Agency support team, which operates and provides direct support to the command in Colorado Springs. And additionally, we are able to leverage the expertise of the 543rd Geospatial Planning Cell, which is located with our Army Service Component, our north in Texas. Next slide, please. Our current work in progress, and this really nests well with what Colonel Fry was talking about in terms of the joint all-domain command and control objectives. You can see the 4 objectives that we have for our command as outlined by General Van Herk, the NORAD U.S. Northcom commander. All-domain awareness, looking across land, maritime, air, space, and cyber, and trying to gain and maintain situational awareness across all those domains. Having information dominance as it relates to distributed sensor networks, which provide us real-time data to inform decision-making. Decision superiority, taking the data that's collected in the field and providing it in a way that the commander can use to make timely, accurate, and informed decisions to get ahead of problems or to respond quickly to unforeseen circumstances. And then finally, global integration, partnering within the United States, both across the whole of government, but also across the Defense Department, and integrating with our Canadian partners for Homeland Defense, and additionally for global defense with our adjacent and partner combatant commands, such as Indo-PACOM and US European Command. We're also in the throes of digital transformation, where we have shifted geospatial services from on-premises hosting to a cloud-based system. As I alluded to before, we're also working very hard to create a common platform that is widely distributed and accessible across the headquarters and our component region and subordinate headquarters as well. And we are in real time collecting data from edge units using either URL surveys or mobile-based native device apps that help us to collect information on personnel status, operation status for current ongoing operations. And then most recently, the real world applications that we've seen has been to track our COVID response across the United States, and particularly this year with wildland firefighting, as it was a very difficult and dynamic season out in the West this year. Next slide. What you see here is just a brief sample of what my directorate is using, the Logistics and Engineering Division. This is a snapshot of our dashboard, which provides both a graphical depiction of the operational environment along with key metrics. So we're looking at potentially how many different supported hospitals are out in the field, and then we're able to get logistic data to make sure that those locations have the sufficient personal protective equipment or other commodities that they need to be successful. We can also drill down to our support installations and determine what their statuses are and if they need additional support, or if they have questions, we can facilitate that through surveys or through email and other types of communications. The bottom line here is that we try to get good visualization integrated with metrics. We're integrating the data across the entire area of responsibility, and we're incorporating data from edge units in the field. Next slide. So where are we going in the future? For us, particularly in the civil support realm, it's critically important to continue our integration with mission partners, specifically FEMA, but also with the Department of Homeland Security for Homeland Security opportunities, DHHS for health, particularly in this the health crisis that we're facing right now with COVID-19, and with other government agencies. We're also looking to leverage and create geo-reference plans. So to integrate with FEMA to have geo-reference plans for response to catastrophic events such as a pneumatic seismic zone earthquake, so that the planning process is captured in a geospatial realm, and those response plans can be quickly taken off the shelf, displayed to the commander, and he could start making decisions immediately. We want to broaden our user base, get more folks trained in the headquarters so that they're looking at integrating and leveraging geospatial systems routinely rather than thinking that it's someone else's job. So changing the culture a little bit to become producers of content, not just merely consumers. Looking farther out, we want to integrate artificial intelligence and machine learning into our data sets as we move to the cloud. Being able to look through and review the data that's in in our repositories allows us to, one, look at past events, but also then to leverage AI and ML to make predictive analysis in the future. We are also in the process of building our classified systems for homeland defense and modernizing our geospatial capabilities in those realms. And then our final opportunity is to update and codify our organizational content management strategy so that users understand what our business practices are, workflows are, and that we're all on the same sheet of music in terms of what how geospatial content should be organized and distributed. So finally, success for us is moving GIS outside of just the GIS niche and getting users to use the system across all commands just as they would any other app or program like PowerPoint or Word. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Hahn. I find it interesting your perspective about making sure everybody's kind of creating content and participating, and not just viewers or consumers, but they can actually be part of the system as well. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit after the rest of the speakers. After this, we have Master Gunnery Sergeant Tiffany Winfrey. She has served as a Geographic Intelligence Specialist, Curriculum Developer, Senior Instructor, Data Management Chief, Geospatial Analysis Branch Chief, Full Motion Video Chief, Plans Chief, MAGTF Intelligence Center Chief, and Operation Chief over her last 19 years in the Marine Corps. She has served at all 3 intelligence battalions across the United States and Okinawa, the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity, Marine Detachment Fort Belvoir, and 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force G2. She is currently the Operations Chief at 2nd Intelligence Battalion, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us today, Master Gunnery Sergeant Winfrey.
Thank you so much, Gary, for having me here today. So I'm going to start with talking just briefly about our past history within GIS, but more importantly, where we want to go in the future for the Marine Corps for GIS. So I had the luxury of coming into the Marine Corps right as we transitioned from the light table era over to the digital era. And we have made such vast improvements on what we have done and been able to do with our geospatial software technology as it's enhanced over the years. So we went from being map makers to what we now would call more data analysts. We do things in relation to the common operational picture, which is that command and control tool that provides the situational awareness for a commander in order to make good decisions. And it's full of data layers that occur in an operational battle space environment. And we take that data and then we do what we normally call in the GIS world a mashup, where we mash all of the common operational picture data with our common intel picture data. So a commander really does get a very good holistic view of the battle space as it's actively happening. And GIS has allowed us in the past to do everything from future planning events, moving personnel and equipment logistically, and even providing targeting support to our fires effects coordination cell. We've partnered very heavily in the past with our coalition partners as well as our sister services, one of them, of course, being the Army Geospatial Center, where we helped to merge together what we had was the geospatial ground warfighter data model. And we're going to continue to build on those relationships as we move into the future. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So when we look at what the Commandant has been saying and how fast we need to be changing and evolving with technology, and we look at our future fights, future warfare, we know it's going to be a near peer adversary. So we have to get out of the mindset of looking at a kinetic environment and really more into a mindset of non-kinetic in the cyber world, which we haven't exactly been able to embrace as quickly as I know that we need to do that. If you do move into the non-kinetic environment, though, you're talking about a lot of data that you're going to need to process all at one time. So I often say here at 2nd Intel Battalion that data is a weapon, and we have to continue to treat data as a weapon as we move forward for the future fight. So we talk about layering and adding data together, whether this is geographical, environmental, situational awareness. But then when you start to add in all the additional information, geopolitical data, open source information, cyber, space, operations and information environment, you end up with a data overload, especially for a human being to be able to digest this data. So as we look forward to the future and knowing what we're going to need to be able to do for that near-peer adversary, we really have to embrace machine learning and artificial intelligence technology in order to allow GIS to be able to effectively do pattern recognition and predictive analysis. If we do that, we'll be able to gain, fuse, and exploit the information from any source and integrate it into our planning. And then we can synchronize the execution of that on multi-domain operations for time, space, and purpose. It'll also help us when we're dealing with a near-peer adversary to continue to focus on our NATO and allied partners when it comes to data sharing. And if we look for a better cross-domain solution as we move to the future, and we use the data attribution, such as a classification, for example, while an individual is physically digitizing, as long as they're marking that classification correctly, there's no reason with technology today that we shouldn't be able to transfer that data automatically over to our NATO and allied partners, along with our sister services, so that we can truly fight a near-peer adversary of the future. And in the Marine Corps, we're going to continue to work on data as a service. We've been battling that one for a while, and most of the time it deals with networking capabilities internal that we utilize. But if we continue to push for data as a service, continue to push for the cross-domain solutions, the technology growth with ML and AI, I think that we're going to be able to effectively fight in a future war. And I will also say that, me personally, I wholeheartedly believe that GIS should be the backbone as we move forward, because we're going to continue to add a ton of information onto the human mind, but GIS already has a solid foundation to be able to utilize the metadata tagging, the attribution, and some different tools and scripting to be able to strip that data out and get it to the commander much faster. And at the end of the day, it's all about the warfighter, and it doesn't matter if you're a NATO or allied partner or a sister service. It's all about getting the data into the hands of the warfighter quickly and efficiently. And thank you so much, Gary, for allowing me to be here today, and I'm looking forward to any questions we might have.
Thank you, Master Gunnery Sergeant Tiffany Winfrey. I appreciate the comments and thinking towards the future more about data, as a enterprise resource and weapon actually in the future, and also addressing the domains of cyberspace. Now we'll shift over to Chief Jeremiah Savage. CW3 Savage serves as the Senior Geospatial Engineer for the 82nd Airborne Division. He advises the 82nd Commander on all topographic and geospatial informational matters. He coordinates and supervises the training, collection, production analysis, interpretation, and processing of geospatial information for use in real world and training environments. Thank you for being with us today, Chief Savage.
Thanks, Gary, for having me here on the discussion. So first, I'm going to start off describing the unique mission that the 82nd Airborne Division has. Not only are we the only airborne division in the Army, and we have that joint forcible entry mission, but we also are the immediate response force for the DoD. What that means is we are on call. We're can be a Northcom mission, a DISCA mission, or a kinetic mission to whatever area of operations that is asked of us. So it is a worldwide mission, and I've been in this seat for about the last 3 years. Really came to see that to fruition as we've been called on multiple hurricane support missions. We went to support COVID relief with the vaccination deployment. We sent a unit out on a no notice deployment to Iraq last year when the hostilities increased. We sent them out within 18 hours, on an aircraft to the theater in Iraq. And then, because we have that unique mission, we participate in a lot of partner exercises all over the world. And with that, GIS has become the foundation of everything we do here. When I took over, the commander, General Mingus, had told me that in my end brief that GIS would be the center of all intelligence and mission command in the next couple of years. And so I took that as a challenge. I kind of told him, sir, I think we already are, but I'll take that challenge. So it really has become that center of what we do here for our commander. He claims he wants one pane of glass, and it really starts that geospatial foundation. And with that airborne entry or the airborne insertion or the GRF mission we have, that multi-domain joint has become imperative because we never go alone. We rely on the Air Force to transport us there. We rely on the Navy for pre-assault fires. We rely on our foreign partners. We're partnered with the three para, the UK parachute infantry regiment multiple times in different operations. So being able to share our GIS foundation with them, it's been absolutely critical. The slides you see in front of us, is some unique things we've did in the last, let's say, year to support our commander's decision through GIS. We started really with the COVID kind of highlighted it, and we've kind of taken it to another level with that, that ground collect using like Survey 123, quick capture, geoforms to collect data and then provide it out into a dashboard, whether it has a map background or not, but we've, really used that to our advantage for, tracking the weather so that we know where the potential deployments would be. So we're ready for that. When we had a hurricane hit North Carolina, we were, giving our commanders what roads were closed, where the flooding was at. We used it to track symptoms of COVID so we could give our commander a good overview of, what he's seeing. So really have been able to enable decisions. Some unique things we do at the 82nd currently. We seem to be the test bed for all DoD and all the new stuff that they want the Army to test. So whether it's ML, AI, we're currently getting fielded the new IVAS, the HoloLens, augmented reality goggles, to test them in an exercise. We're implement, Project Maven with the feature extractions from AI, from FMV and still imagery. So we worked that last year, putting that on a common operating picture for the commander and then being able to do analysis on that data. And in the future, we want to continue to, increase our presence with GIS, trying to push it across the command system as, Colonel Fry and Colonel Hahn said, getting other entities to be collectors. And that's really where we're pushing, not just, I work in the G2 or the Intel section, but not just being us to be the data creators, but, getting your ops guys, your logistics, your medics, the soldiers, every soldier is a sensor. They've said that for years in the Army. So, getting that, I leave here and I got a meeting to talk about how we use virtual reality to better train our jump masters to be able to understand actions in an aircraft when they're putting paratroopers out onto the ground without actually having to be there. One of the exercises, we talked the 3D realm, and we're really pushing 3D. My CG's comment was, if I can't see in 3D, then I really can't understand the battlefield. So we're going to make a big push in the next, say, couple months to be able to build a planning tool that the soldiers can plan and mission rehearse off of a 3D environment, and then possibly push it to their IVAS, the augmented reality or virtual reality environment. So that's pretty much all I have. Open to questions.
Thanks, Chief Savage. I think I really appreciate all of our speakers' comments today and the work they're doing in support of our nation and to serve their mission. What I'd like to do is now we'll transition to a Q&A session, and we've had some questions in the chat that we'll try to address, as well as get the discussion going. One thing for you, Chief Savage, I saw a comment here about that they were in Afghanistan and they didn't have a 12 Yankee to support them. And then what they found is some of the 12 Yankees were very tied up in creating kind of basic maps. And it seems, I think you're doing a lot of new future testing and kind of pushing the envelope. I wondered if you had any comments on the work you're doing to kind of be able to spend more time doing analysis, maybe deliver more value-added applications that really, and hopefully get people to create maybe their own maps or be able to serve them in that way. If you had any comments on what you've been able to do there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colonel Frey, I'm going to see what his reaction is to this comment, since he's our my ticket for ACMG. But obviously the 12 Yankee 125 Delta Foundation in Geo has always been the topographical map creation, and that's really where our foundation is. And we can get as advanced as we want, and all the the commanders still want a paper map, and that they're always going to want that. But understanding that we're also GIS analysts, and we have an analytical position. I made the comment, and I teach here at the 82nd, and I push all my analysts to kind of take this same mindset. If it can be put on the ground, if there's a point on the ground and it's a data point, and it can be geospatially referenced, then it's my job. It's my job to be able to display that to the commander, to give him a clear understanding of that. So it's a culture shift, as technology goes, and we advance our training, and we advance our mindset and personalities. And, as commanders learn too, it's not just, the 12 Yankee, but a commander has to have an appetite for wanting more and more GIS in different realms. So, enhancing that culture is really what I've focused on. Obviously, we keep our foundation, we create good maps, and that topographical map creation, we push that, but we also try to push as analysts to understand GIS better. Does that kind of answer the question, Gary?
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Another question that came in, Colonel Fry, if you wanted to maybe address in the joint environment of competition, particularly with the pacing threat, how far away are the services from accepting a common geo framework and data store?
I want to add on the Chief's remarks, and then I'm going to answer that question if it's all right with you. So, 12 Yankee geospatial soldiers limited to, topographic stuff. A lot of that is because they've not been fully enabled. The current geospatial workstation that Army soldiers have is based off of a 2005 requirements document. That drove not just the hardware, but the software baseline that's on that system. So the soldiers simply don't have the tools to do a lot of advanced geospatial analysis, which we would like them to do. And in fact, a lot of those are currently in development with the Engineer Research and Development Center under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And they have a suite of software tools that look at vegetation, snow, ice, you name it, hydrologic data, soils analysis. And their intent is to deliver a suite of applications to the 12 Yankee soldier to be added to that baseline so they can do more analysis. Currently the 12 Yankee, his simple tool, since they don't have it on their system, is they can do a reach back to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the States, where they'll leverage some PhD guys and provide that kind of product support. But it's simply not deployed forward for them to be able to do that. And so, but that's changing. That is going to change, where they'll have those tools forward. And indeed, some of those tools will be pushed to the end user, where they can click a few buttons and do certain levels of analysis. So, and the 12 Yankee availability forward to do that within the Army. They're not fielded at the battalion level simply because the Army has a congressionally mandated end strength, and the Army's got to make decisions on where to put people. And fielding geospatial at the battalion level is very, I mean, there's a lot of battalions out there. So if you look at the personnel and equipment to do that in the financial cost, it's problematic. So that's why it's generally at the brigade level and higher within the Army. So back onto the joint question. So joint data store, okay, that's called the National Geospatial Agency. They have a system called GRID, and I apologize, I can't remember what GRID stands for, but suffice, it is the NGA's big data store that was developed just a few years ago. And the intent of that is for data to go to all the services and interagency partners, and probably ultimately multinational partners. So that's generally the data store. The challenge with that, as Master Guns kind of alluded to, is if a soldier or Marine at the ground level produces a new piece of data, they find something, they add a bridge or they add something to the data, does that data pass all the way up the pipes to the national store? It's supposed to, but it doesn't in reality. So that is something that's still, it's not because it's technologically impossible, it's just the resource to get it done. As far as a joint framework, that is what JADC2 is all about. Northcom is employing that to a limited degree, but that is the framework. There's a joint memo out and draft I just seen recently, and it talks about, okay, what are the common data fabrics going to be within JADC2? One of those is GON and GIS, where they're going to look at, okay, here's what the Army requires for GIS, here's Navy, Marines, what they all need. Now, will we all use the exact same data format and standard at the joint level? I think that's to be explored, because each service has unique requirements for what they need to use that geospatial data for. So, like the Army doesn't really care about open blue water, so I don't really need that data, and I may not need the tool to do it. But suffice that the fabric to move geospatial out of a joint repository or a national repository like NGA, that is ultimately going to happen. And I know there's some question, okay, we've done that. We've probably tried this before. We've been operating as a joint force for since like World War II. But how is this different? Well, I would say emphasis. You've got at least 4-star emphasis on a joint. Well, actually, have joint staff emphasis. So you got the SecDef interested in it. But Northcom, through this COVID pandemic, has been exercising some experimentation with JADC2 with COVID, and giving the COP, the Northcom commander, a COP that's based off of a limited JADC2 environment. So as long as there's senior level emphasis, it's going to happen. And as the Department of Defense, big picture, sees its fundings, possibly being reduced to accommodate other national priorities, all right, so we are going to be forced to not have multiple systems that do the same thing, and that includes across the services. That includes leveraging all the services when it comes to meet a mission. So it's not always going to be an Army mission. It's generally going to be a joint mission. We're going to be, joint force going to accomplish it. So how do we interoperate? And you just got to adapt. You go back 20, 25, 30 years, we can all look at the same paper map and we're all good. But now it's geospatial data. It's not a paper map. So we've got to make that work. It's going to happen. I mean, anybody that watches Star Trek can see that these things are possible in the future, right? So anybody that has a dream or a vision, all you have to do is continue to work towards that vision. And all of Star Trek is like a few hundred years in the future. It provides a vision and a dream for everybody. And we know what is possible. It's just a matter of going through the bureaucracy and the technical hurdles to make that happen. Thanks.
Thanks, Colonel Fry. So another question that came in for Lieutenant Colonel Hahn is, in looking at JADC2 rollout, how have you found getting the other services on board, specifically probably in your experience with the AF North, NAV North, and the folks you've had to work with? If you had any.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just to pile on to what Colonel Fry was saying, that the Northcom, specifically the Northcom commander and our previous commander, General Shaughnessy, really looked to leverage GIS capabilities to provide a good snapshot to him as a commander so that he understands the operational environment. And General Van Herk, our current commander, is continuing to press forward with those JADC2 innovations and digital transformations across the command. In terms of specific subordinate, component, and regional commands, we've had a lot of success building out with JTFCS, which is Joint Task Force Civil Support. They are a subcomponent of our North, and they have a very well-rounded and dedicated geospatial team that supports them with their visualization, and they've been doing some great work. The Joint Force headquarters in Washington, so JFHQ NCR also has a very robust GIS cell, and they're leveraging systems. We've had some good development recently with building out capabilities for both Alaska Command and the JFAC, Joint Force Air Component Command, AFNORTH, have also been able to build out a lot of digital capabilities leveraging the NORAD Northcom GeoPortal. The challenge that we have right now, and we're still working through it, is the data sharing and federation and where content is hosted. Specifically, JTFCS and our North have been using different hosting platforms, and so data integration has sometimes been a challenge. It's a little bit easier with the Air Force units, ALCOM and AFNORTH, who are leveraging posting their content on the NORAD Northcom GeoPortal. We're still working with NavNorth and the Marines to get their capabilities up and integrated. I think there's a lot more capability outside of the civil support space and in the homeland defense space where there's going to be greater opportunity specifically for maritime all domain awareness that would be integrated through the NORAD systems. So overall, a lot of good work is being done, and we still have more to do, but there are great opportunities across the enterprise.
Great, thanks, Colonel Hahn. So one other question that's come in is maybe for Master Gunnery Sergeant Winfrey and Chief Savage, is a little bit of any insight they have on kind of how things have changed with the shift, recently from counterinsurgency focus more to, large scale combat operations, and how that's affecting it. Has it affected it, or do you see a lot of change, or is it kind of going back to what we used to do? What are your experience? You have such a breadth of experience over the years. I'm curious how you could how that's changed what you're doing and what you see to the future.
Oh, absolutely, Gary. It really has changed. I mean, we are no longer just looking at a baseline set of data with a enemy that is not as robust technologically as we have been. Our enemy is actually outpacing us technologically, so we have to continue to catch up. But with that, you're getting such an influx of data flow, textual information, Facebook, messengers, Instagrams, social media platform itself alone, and the amount of data that you could eventually get from that to help you look for certain things. So it is a paradigm shift in how you manipulate the GIS data as a whole. It is not always going to be just geographic data anymore like it used to be. It really is a holistic operations and information environment, and bringing it all together in one view with the data attribution to go with it to support the commander. And I'll let Jeremiah hit the next part because I know he was about to talk too.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a shift because, as we look at, when you go a coin-centric flight, you're kind of looking at small areas. But when you go to that near peer, change of flight, you're looking, when we talk geospatial data, you're talking countrywide. And, the analysis you're doing is not how do I go to this village, it's how do I maneuver a whole division's worth of forces with your joint, a joint package across the whole country to seize terrain. So it's definitely a challenge to say the least, and it's definitely changed. Even when we look at AI ML implementation with GIS data, I'm not looking for a person anymore. I'm looking for, okay, where's the tank? Where's the radar? So it's changed how our mindset with, AI implementation within our forces, to enable fires, that it's a huge change in that, because what you're looking for is a whole different game. And yeah, it's definitely been an interesting transition in the last couple of years, to say the least.
Great, thanks. We had a question here, Colonel Fry, about the Army's plan to implement One World Terrain.
And so for those who aren't familiar, One World Terrain is a workflow. It's not a format. It takes multiple sources of geospatial data. It can be open source, it can be national data, whatever, and then it's merged together through that workflow to produce a visualized 3D product in the end. Again, if you ever play Call of Duty, it's basically the same kind of thing. So that's important to know what One World Terrain is, and it's used heavily in the synthetic training environment. So in any kind of training center, very specific uses for it right now are the headset, the IVAS headset. I remember what IVAS stands for, but it's a headset that goes on a soldier's head. It provides augmentation reality, and it's also intended to be used for the common operating picture, at least in the training environment, and possibly, depending on how it delivers, set the vision or concept for operational use. So the difference between what's deliverable in the training environment, where One World Terrain exists, and the operational side, where One World Terrain does not, due to material and processing limitations. So One World Terrain, it's, bottom line up front, it is not going to be the Army standard. The Army standard for 3D, which One World Terrain is based off, is going to be based off of 3D standards that are found in industry. So the Army Geospatial Center has that. They've already adopted a format and how to manage that. And then from that, end users can take that to build whatever type of 3D product they need. In some cases, it might be One World Terrain, where they'll pull from that national format to build a visualized product for an end user for a specific need. But in other cases, that's not the need. You might need to use some of that 3D data for some other purpose, for some other type of analysis, for which One World Terrain is not the suitable format. Because one problem with One World Terrain is it loses feature attribution. It takes all those layers and merges it into one final visualized product, which is great for visualization. But if that's not your end state, then it's useless. And so we stick with 3D standards that are found in industry. What that also does, when you use standard 3D formats, it also supports joint interagency and multinational geospatial efforts down the road. So I talked about that standard shareable geospatial foundation, which operates within the combined operating environment, which will ultimately go into the joint all-domain command and control. You've got to have standards that everybody recognize. One World Terrain is a proprietary process. It is operated by a contractor. It's not an Army workflow, really. So and it requires some material solutions that we don't have with the soldier. Well, 3D in general, we have problems with 3D, both processing, storage, and transport of that. Operational systems, so tactical systems, aren't the right tool, which is something the Army is studying. That's kind of out, beyond the stretch of this conversation. I think Chief's got some comments on One World Terrain, because what the STE community has done is, in order to test it, not just in the training environment, is they have reached out to operational units to see how it works and where the benefit is, and how that can be adapted for real world use, not just training environment. Chief.
Yeah, no, sir. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Really, it's been used for visualization in the last, that's visualization of the battlefield. And when you talk visualization, not targeting and certain analysis, but visualization, we're going to take the best we can. And One World Terrain right now, that's what we're testing with it. We're using it, exercise right now. They're demoing with 18th Airborne Corps here to see what the battlefield looks like over the 3D environment. We use it for some of our mainly visualization and understanding the routes. And when we build our VR environment, we kind of use that data to build that VR environment. But really, currently it is just for visualization until they get some of their standards and stuff fixed. But yeah, you definitely hit it on the nail on the head, sir.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Actually, we had a follow-up question here about the accessibility. I'm not sure you can talk to this yet, but the accessibility of One World Terrain to other DoD organizations, and how do people access that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So One World Terrain is a Army cross-functional team synthetic training environment program. They have contracted for it, so it's an Army-funded program which supports the models and sims efforts within the training environment. So if another service wanted to use that, call Vricon, who does that, and they can set up their own program. Now I would caution, there are other vendors out there that can do 3D. There are a lot of them. That just happens to be the one that's supporting One World Terrain. So it's not the only game out there.
Great. We had a question for Master Gunnery Sergeant Winfrey, asking about your experience with integrating with the U.S. Navy. And have you had any experience with the Navy integration, whether in training or operations, and do you foresee more of it in the future?
Okay, so I have actually never been on a ship, if that is a thing when you're in the Marine Corps for 20 years, but I do have a lot of experience with the stories when they come back. We are working really hard right now to integrate the intel capabilities that we provide on a ship with our Navy counterparts. And there are some things I had learned over the years that the Navy, it's a little different than it is for us, where we have dedicated Marines that do GIS. They actually do not have the dedicated ones on the ship. But there's also a paradigm shift between getting everyone to understand that sea and land is extremely important to both entities. So whereas they might want to look at the sea, we need both the sea and the land. So we're working really hard on the GIS side of the house to merge a lot of this data together. We're also working really hard out here at TUMAF with 2nd and 6th fleets when it comes to figuring out how we're going to grow this capability, such as GIS data, partnering it up on the ship, but with the AI and ML that can benefit both of us, because we have to make sure that our data can seamlessly talk between the two when we are on ship. So we are in the throes of the innovation part of it, more R&D parts, because you would be surprised. It's actually pretty hard to put a Marine Corps program of record onto a ship utilizing their own network capabilities. So we are working very hard to bridge that gap. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thanks for the comments. One, I'd like Lieutenant Colonel Hahn, with some of your experience in doing JADC2, I was curious about, or I see a question here about how do you see some of the kind of maybe differences in what, this concept of JADC2 and what's being pushed now, and where we've had a lot of joint and interoperability, discussions in the past and efforts. I'm just curious, what do you think is the key differences, or really some of the focus areas?
Sure. So I like to tell folks when we talk about GIS and say, well, why hasn't this been done or that been done? And I said, my typical response, well, if it was easy, it would be done already. So there are certain challenges across the entire enterprise. All three other panelists kind of alluded to it when you talk about service-specific or proprietary technologies. So that, I think, is going to continue to be a challenge. However, my experience, at least with over the last 2.5 years with United States Northern Command, both from the perspective of the COVID response and some other operations that we've done, is at least in the civil support space, there's a lot of information from other partners, from open source, that can be easily integrated through the platforms that we're using. And it shows value within when the commander is interested and is leveraging the data. Subordinate commands, partners are more willing to jump on because they see that the commander is using it. And if he or she at the highest level is ingesting geospatial data from web maps, from from dashboards, subordinate commands pick up on that and go, this is an effective way to enable decision making at the highest levels. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the interoperability, I think technology is evolving quite quickly, that we can better utilize data sharing and collaborative agreements now, because the architecture, I think, is a little bit more mature, which then again enables interoperability and data sharing. I think in the past, again, if systems were more service specific or proprietary, those stovepipes and barriers are a little bit harder to break down. And then finally, I think within the current civil support space, particularly for COVID, there's a nationwide response that's going on, and that enables a lot more sharing. So I think we are able to learn just by doing, and with having commanders and science and technology folks who are willing to maybe push out the limits a little bit more of where they might be comfortable with, accept a little bit of risk in terms of deploying new technologies and employing them in a way that is new and innovative. And if there are some failures or hiccups, understanding that that's a normal part of the deployment and development process, and that will continue to refine over time. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and we're learning by doing, and I hope we can build on that both in the civil support space and in the homeland defense space in the future.
Great, thanks for your insight, Colonel. I appreciate it. Well, unfortunately, we still have lots of questions, and we could probably talk for all day on this subject, but our time is up for the special interest group. I want to thank all of our distinguished panelists for their time today to share their stories and experience, and really for their outstanding work and service to our country. Thank you to all of our attendees for their time and the excellent questions they provided. We look forward to connecting with you in the future. If we are not able to get some of the questions today, we'll be in touch to try to answer them. And like I said, we put up LinkedIn profiles for all of our panelists if you want to connect with them there. And I want you to please enjoy the rest of the Fed GIS conference. Remember that you have access to the platform for another month. So if you can catch any sessions that you missed or want to see again. And again, we really appreciate your attendance, your time, and being with us here. And thanks again to our panelists.